Friends, something extraordinary is happening to the Democrat Party. And I do not use the word extraordinary lightly. I have been behind this microphone for a very long time, and I have watched these people do some remarkable things. Remarkable in the way that a car fire on the freeway is remarkable. But what is unfolding right now in the summer of 2026 in the Democratic primaries across this country is something I have been predicting, been telling you about for years. Years. The Democrat Party is being eaten alive from the inside by socialists. And I'll be honest with you, I'm having more fun than a human being should be allowed to have. Here's the setup. Last night, primary elections in Wisconsin and Minnesota. The Democratic Socialists of America, the DSA, these are not your grandfather's liberals, folks. These are not even your father's liberals. These are people who look at Venezuela and say, well, they just didn't do it right. These people have been running through Democratic primaries like a hot knife through government cheese. And the establishment Democrats, the Chuck Schumers, the Nancy Pelosi's, the people who built this party are watching it happen, and they cannot stop it. They cannot stop it because they created it. They lit the match, they handed out the kindling, they built the bonfire, and now they are standing there watching themselves burn. Last night in Minnesota, Peggy Flanagan, the lieutenant governor, a left-wing insurgent, beats the establishment Democrat in the Senate primary by 20 points. Chuck Schumer, who fancied himself the great architect of the Democrat Senate majority, backed the loser. Again, that's 2 straight primary cycles where Schumer has backed somebody and watched them get run over by the socialist wing of his own party. The turtle over in the Republican cloakroom has to be feeling pretty good about himself right now by comparison. And then in Wisconsin, the DSA candidate Francesca Hong, socialist, was up double digits in the polls heading into last night. And she lost, narrowly, to David Crowley, the Milwaukee County executive, who you would not exactly describe as a Reagan conservative. But for the Democrats, a win for Crowley is like finding a life raft on the Titanic. It keeps you alive for about another 20 minutes. So what does it all mean? What is happening to these people? I'm Rick LeBeau. This is Rush Hour, and we are just getting started. All right, let's dig into this. Let's really dig in, because this story, the socialist takeover of the Democrat Party, is the story of our time. And I want you to understand what you're watching. The Democratic Socialists of America. Now, I want to be very clear about something. This is not a fringe group that wandered in from the street. These people have been working patiently, methodically, in the way that termites work. You don't notice them until the floor caves in. The DSA has been running candidates in Democratic primaries for years. Local races, state legislature races, congressional races, and they have been winning. And with every win, they have recruited more candidates, raised more money, built more infrastructure. They have been doing the hard, boring, unglamorous work of political organizing, and the establishment Democrats were too busy doing cable news hits and fundraising dinners to notice. Now they've noticed. In Wisconsin, Francesca Hong, and let me tell you about Francesca Hong, because she is the perfect avatar for what the DSA represents. She is a state legislator, she is a Democratic socialist, and her pitch to Wisconsin Democrats was essentially, the party hasn't been left enough. Not left enough. We're talking about a party that has spent the last decade calling for open borders, defunding the police, taxpayer-funded, you name it, and these people are saying it's not left enough. Jeff Zeleny over at CNN, the Communist News Network, even he noted that some people who enjoyed her policies were worried about electability. Which tells you something. Even the people who liked what she was saying thought that what she was saying would get them killed in November. And they're right. David Crowley pulled off the upset. Narrow, very narrow. And the Democrat establishment is breathing a sigh of relief that should tell you everything about where this party is. When beating a socialist by a few percentage points in your own primary is considered a victory, that's where they are. Meanwhile, up in Minnesota, the Senate race, Peggy Flanagan beats Angie Craig. Now, Angie Craig was a member of Congress, an incumbent, an establishment Democrat, a real card-carrying member of the club. And Flanagan, who is the lieutenant governor, who is as far left as the day is long, beat her by 20 points. 20. That is not a close race. That is not a message. That is a rout. That is a statement. The Minnesota Democratic Party looked at its own establishment and said, "We don't want what you're selling." And then there's Chuck Schumer. Oh, my friends, I have to talk about Chuck Schumer for a moment, because there is a certain poetic justice to what is happening to this man that I find deeply, deeply satisfying. Chuck Schumer built his career on being the great transactional politician, the deal maker, the guy who knew where every body was buried and who owed what to whom. He was the architect of the Democrat Senate majority. He was the man who kept the caucus together. And now he has become a figure that his own party is running against. His endorsements are the kiss of death. Twice now, in back-to-back primary cycles, Schumer has thrown his weight behind somebody and watched that somebody get demolished by the socialist insurgency. You know what that is? That is a man who spent his entire career reading the room and has completely lost the ability to read the room. The room has moved. The room is now filled with people who want government to own everything, tax everything, regulate everything, and apologize for everything. And Chuck Schumer is standing there in his expensive suit, holding his little for the people talking points, and the room is looking at him like he's a museum exhibit. Now, and here's where I want to spend a little time, because this matters. The drive-by media is going to try to frame last night as a split decision. Well, the establishment won in Wisconsin. So it's complicated, it's nuanced, there are competing forces, and they'll spend 3 weeks running think pieces about the soul of the Democratic Party and what it all means, and can the party find common ground, and blah, 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 blah. Here is the reality, and it is simple. The Democrat Party is being pulled in two directions by two groups that fundamentally cannot coexist. You have the old establishment, big donors, corporate America, the media class, the Schumers and the Pelosi's, people who want power and are willing to use the language of the left to get it. And then you have the DSA true believers who actually mean every word of it, who actually want to tax wealth into oblivion, who actually want to dismantle the military, who actually want open borders and socialized medicine and all the rest of it. And these two groups are now in a death match for control of the party. The establishment thought they could manage the left wing. They thought they could give them a little bit of what they wanted, some progressive rhetoric here, some identity politics there, and keep them in line. They were wrong. They were so wrong. Because the socialist wing doesn't want to be managed. They want to win, and they are winning. Now, here's the fun part, my friends. Here's what makes me lean back in the Attila the Hun chair and grin. For the mainstream Republican Party, for the normal, hardworking American voter who is sitting in the center of this country watching all of this unfold, this is a gift. This is an absolute gift wrapped in a bow, because in November in Wisconsin, you will have Tom Tiffany, a solid, experienced Republican congressman, running against a Democrat who barely survived a socialist primary by the skin of his teeth in a party that is lurching left. In Minnesota, you have Michelle Tafoya, and let me tell you, if you don't know Michelle Tafoya, you should. She's a sharp, principled woman, running for Senate against whoever emerges from this mess. And the Democrat nominee in Minnesota's Senate race is a left-wing insurgent who just trounced the establishment, Peggy Flanagan, running in a state that has been trending purple against a Republican candidate who has actual name recognition and actual cross-demographic appeal. The Democrats are going to walk into these November races dragging the socialist wing like a ball and chain. The establishment voters will be lukewarm. The independent voters will be spooked. And the Republican candidates will be able to point to their opponents and say, look at who sent them here. Look at what they stand for. Now, I want to address something because the drive-by media will raise it and I want to get ahead of it. They will say, but Rick, Crowley won in Wisconsin. The establishment fought off the socialists. Maybe the center can hold. My friends, Crowley won by a handful of votes. In a Democratic primary, in a state he will now have to run in a general election with a socialist base that is deeply unenthusiastic about him. Half his party wanted Francesca Hong. They got David Crowley. You think those people are going to show up in November with the fire and passion that makes campaigns win? You think they're going to knock on doors and make calls and donate money for a guy they settled for? That is not how enthusiasm works. And Tom Tiffany didn't just win his primary, he sailed through it. No civil war, no drama, no ideological cannibalism. He raises his hand, he walks out, he says, let's go. That is the contrast. Now let me close this out with a broader observation, because I think it matters. What you are watching in the Democratic Party is the inevitable consequence of spending decades telling people that America is fundamentally broken, fundamentally unjust, fundamentally racist and corrupt and irredeemable, and then being surprised when those people produce politicians who want to burn it down and start over. You told an entire generation that the system was rigged. You told them that capitalism was exploitation. You told them that the founding was a fraud, and now that generation is voting, and they are voting for people who believe every word of what you told them. The establishment Democrats made this bed. They are going to sleep in it. All right, let's run the roundup. 3 stories, rapid fire, all things worth your time. First up, and this one deserves some real attention because the drive-by media is not giving it nearly enough. The FBI is reporting that 1 year into the Trump administration's Washington, D.C. crime crackdown, the numbers are in. Over 6,000 arrests, more than 1,300 illegal firearms off the streets, and a 44% drop in homicides. 44% in 1 year. Now, I want you to think about that for a second. For years, we were told by the media, by the Democrats, by the activist class, that the way to reduce crime was to reduce police presence, to reimagine public safety, to stop arresting people because arresting people was itself a form of violence against the community. We were told that, seriously. That was the position of a major American political party and the mainstream media that covers it. And then the Trump administration directed the FBI to actually do its job in the nation's capital. And in 12 months, homicides in D.C. dropped by nearly half. The drive-bys are covering this story the way you cover something you'd rather not cover. Briefly, quietly, with lots of hedging language about context and methodology. Because if this story gets the coverage it deserves, it blows up the entire narrative they've been peddling for 6 years. You can't cheer for defunding the police and then pretend the inverse doesn't apply when the results come in. That's not how cause and effect works, even in Rio Linda. 44%. I want that number rattling around in your head the next time somebody tells you that tough-on-crime policies don't work. Second story, and this one is about New Jersey, which, God love it, is like a perpetual science experiment in how not to run a government. A former mayor named Gina LaPlaca and her husband Jason Carty are now facing ballot fraud charges. The allegation is that they used fake signatures on her Democratic primary petition. Fake signatures, and this comes after she already pleaded guilty to a DUI. Now, I want to be fair. Innocent until proven guilty. This is America. That applies to everyone. But I will say this. There is something almost refreshing about the brazenness. Most political fraud is at least dressed up in some kind of plausible deniability. This is allegedly a woman who, having already pled guilty to one crime, said to herself or her husband, "You know what? Let's also commit election fraud." And this is in New Jersey. Running as a Democrat. I am shocked. Shocked, I tell you. The reason I flagged this story, beyond the entertainment value, which is considerable, is that election integrity is not a theoretical concern. It is not a conspiracy theory. It is not something that only paranoid people worry about. It is a real thing that real people actually do. The ballot petition process exists precisely to make sure that candidates have actual, real support from actual, real people. When you fake those signatures, you are not committing a victimless paperwork crime. You are subverting the democratic process that the left claims to hold sacred. And where is it happening? In a Democratic primary in New Jersey, allegedly by a Democrat, with her husband allegedly helping. The drive-by media will memory hole this faster than you can say fortified election. But we remember, we always remember. Third story. This one has my full, undivided attention and should have yours. A retired Rear Admiral, Mark Montgomery, is sounding the alarm about something that should be front-page news everywhere. Russia is reportedly giving China submarine quieting technology. Now, for those of you who don't spend your leisure hours studying naval warfare, and most of you probably don't, and that's fine, this matters enormously. The United States Navy has long held a decisive advantage over the Chinese Navy in undersea warfare. Our submarines are quiet. They are extraordinarily hard to detect. The Chinese have been trying to close that gap for decades and haven't been able to do it on their own. And now, apparently, Russia is handing them the keys, giving them the technology to make their submarines harder to hear, harder to track, harder to kill. This is not an abstract arms race concern. We are talking about the Taiwan Strait. We are talking about the Pacific. We are talking about the primary military scenario in which the United States and China could come into direct conflict. And the advantage that our Navy has relied on, the undersea advantage, is being quietly eroded by a Russia-China technology transfer that most Americans are not aware of, because the drive-by media would rather talk about whatever the outrage of the hour is. Russia and China, two countries that have every reason in the world to see American power diminished, working together, quietly, patiently, while we argue about pronouns and DEI mandates and whether it's okay to say America first. This is the world we are living in, and we had better start acting like it. My friends, let's bring it home. What a day, what a glorious, instructive, endlessly entertaining day it has been. What you are watching in the Democratic primaries, in the crime numbers from D.C., in the corruption story from New Jersey, in the submarine warning from the Pacific, is a country at a crossroads. On one side, clarity, accountability, results. Crime goes down when you enforce the law. Elections work better when you don't fake the signatures. Your military keeps its edge when you pay attention to your adversaries. On the other side, a political party that is conducting an ideological civil war in broad daylight, trying to out-socialist itself into oblivion, while its old establishment figures stand there blinking, wondering what happened to the coalition they built. The American people are not stupid. They see what works. They see what doesn't. And come November, they are going to have a very clear choice in state after state between Republicans who are focused on governing and Democrats who are still trying to figure out which faction of their own party is going to be in charge by the time the voting starts. I have been saying for years that the left's coalition was held together by shared grievance, not shared vision. Grievance is a powerful glue right up until the moment you win, and then you have to govern. And you have to agree on what you're actually for. And that's when it falls apart. We are watching it fall apart in real time. And I, for one, am enjoying every single minute of it. You stay informed, you stay engaged, and don't let anybody tell you that what's happening in these primaries is complicated. It's not. Very simple. And you know it, and I know it, and deep down, they know it too. I'm Rick LeBow. This has been Rush Hour. Same time tomorrow if they let us back on.